Hi, Shayla.
Hi there. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks for joining.
Yeah, absolutely excited to be here.
Hey,
Yeah,
Brian.
apparently my video is unavailable, so I might need to leave and come back in again.
No worries. How's your evening going, Shayla?
It's going pretty good. Yeah,
Or
this is my first remote event and seems kind of cool. I joined some of the networking sessions as well and said hi to a couple people. That was
nice.
kind of cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, those are fun. Product BC's been experimenting on this platform for about a year, and Mind the Product in San Francisco as well has been using this platform. It's pretty exciting. Some of the you know, group circle networking activities that they have and things like that. I've been enjoying it quite a bit. Hey, there's Brian. Hey, Brian.
We made it.
All right, and is Rohan joining us tonight as well?
No, Rohan's he's out of the office right now,
Okay.
visiting his family.
Cool. We're getting some visitors jumping into the room as well. So thanks everybody for joining. Did you mention, Brian, that you had a PowerPoint deck that you wanted to share as well? Is there like a walkthrough here?
Yeah, we do. Yeah, I'm not sure how you want to run the session, but we've got basically a whole bunch of questions. Some of them have slides associated with them. Some of them just have our thoughts. And I think depending on how you want to run it, we can either go through the slide deck and treat it like that, or you can kind of moderate some questions and we can pull up the slides as we see fit.
Sure. Yeah, I'm open personally. Just let's keep it engaging for the crowd and for
Yeah.
everybody that's in the room. Maybe just feel free to jump into chat if you have any questions. Hey, Salil. Yeah, I'm happy to just run with it. So, you saw the questions I was going to ask. I added a few extras in there just to kind of like pop out there. I figured maybe you could run with your PowerPoint deck. We can kind of walk through that. If there's any kind of remaining questions, I'll toss them over to you or open it up to the crowd if they have any specific questions to what you share, if that works for you.
Yeah, that's quite all right. Let's do that. I'll try to share a screen here. Ooh, I see they're integrated with Miro. That's fun. Let me know if you guys can see a slide deck.
Yep, it's coming through now.
Great. Let's see if we can go to present mode. Hey, wonderful. That works out all right, and pretty high fidelity too. Well, welcome everyone. Thanks for joining the session. I'm really excited to chat today. Like what you heard, we were discussing, we have some slides, but really this is informal. So pause us at any time. I'm not sure if you can promote yourself to speak or if it's just through the chat, but at any point in time, just ping something in the chat and I'll try to monitor that to drive a discussion. So just quick round of intros. Maybe I'll go first, Shayla, and then feel free to introduce yourself. My name is Brian, and I'm a product manager at Dialpad. I work on a product that we call Voice Intelligence, which we'll get to in a second. We'll also talk about what Dialpad is. I'm sure not everyone's familiar with us. Yeah, I've been at Dialpad now and living in Vancouver for about a year and a half. Really love it here. I'm originally from Ontario. Probably many of us are, and prior to that, I used to live in Germany. But I've been loving my time here, and with that, I'll toss things over to Shayla.
Thanks, Brian. Yeah, my name is Shayla Stousgard. I'm an associate product manager on the analytics team here at Dialpad. I joined this past June, so just over 6 months ago. Prior to that, I was also living in Germany, coincidentally. I am from Vancouver and love Vancouver very much. I find mountains are the common denominator for where I like to live. So, yeah.
Cool. Cool. So let's kick things off with what Dialpad does. Here's a slide with a lot of content, of which I won't go over it all. But ultimately, Dialpad is a voice over internet provider that's entirely based in the cloud. So we provide business phones to business people like ourselves dealing in the office that can basically be right on your cell phone like another number. We also provide phone solutions for contact centers, for sales dialers, and last but not least, we provide a conferencing software that we call Uber Conference. in where you can have video calls and conference calls. Across all 4 of these products, we have a product called Voice Intelligence, which we can get into more in a second, but is ultimately your aid in a call. And so what it's doing is pulling out interesting things like questions and action items and other bits of information and moments that you should follow up on. But it's also providing recommendations to our sales and customer service representatives. Generally, our strategy is to be the UCaaS provider, so that's Unified Communications Provider. And what we do is, do that through all of these different types of communication. So in the Dialpad product, you can not only do calls, but you can message, and that's very much like you're in a chat with another colleague. Here's a quick look at our Uber conference software. You're all familiar with it. We use conferencing tool, I'm sure, quite a lot in our day-to-day now. Like others, no pin, very simple to join, send out a link, and immediately in the call. We have our Talk product, which is our business phone, and that's ultimately aimed to replace people's desk phones. And so we used to have a tagline, "Kill the desk phone." We could still apply that tagline, though I'm sure the work from home mandate already did that. So what we do is that integrates directly with a cell phone, and a salesperson can be on the road and having a call at any point in time. Voice Intelligence leverages 2 bits of technology to do that, and one of those bits of technology is ASR, automatic speech recognition, and the last is natural language processing. So as you can imagine, if I was having this call right now and I said to Shayla, "Hey Shayla, send me a birthday cake, please," and hopefully that would get tagged as an action item and send Shayla a little message at the end of the call to say, "Hey, Brian really wants a birthday cake," and that would be one of the applications. Yeah, and she would order it promptly. We provide custom language models. Everyone speaks differently. Everyone has different language. We all have our own business dialects, acronyms, those kinds of things. So we customize that for our customers. And we do all this in real time. So we provide real-time sentiment analysis. You can hear a fire alarm going off in the distance. Sorry about that. Real-time sentiment analysis and recommendations to agents, both in the customer service case and sales context. And here's a quick look at what a customer service representative might see while they're on the call. Great. Blake, do you want to just to continue on and dive into kind of how we're structured?
Sure. Yeah. I was going to actually ask you just on the first few slides that you have there, just a little bit about the story of Dialpad as well. Like, what's your history? When did it start? How did it come together? What were like the initial products? Maybe you can start a little bit about sort of Dialpad's story and history.
Yeah, actually, I out on exactly that, but verbally. So Dialpad was originally founded as Dialpad over 20 years ago, which is pretty wild. That company was then bought by another company that we all know, Yahoo, in where it was called Yahoo Voice. And then that split off into another company called Grand Central, where Grand Central was a free VoIP provider. If anyone was aware of it, it was one of the first, entirely based in the cloud. Really, really impressive. All of this done by the same founders every single time. Grand Central was then bought by Google and was the seed to a product that we all use called Google Voice. Google Voice, as you know, went consumer. Our founders, Craig Walker and the rest, had an idea that this could be applied to business applications, and so spun off out of Google, where Google was one of our first investors, to make a company that was then called Dialpad after they bought back the name from Yahoo. And over the last 10 years now, we've been Dialpad and have been steadily growing, of course, aided by the need to communicate co-located now. but really, really excited about most recent round of funding and some of the applications that we can do with our fully kind of integrated UCaaS product. So very cool.
Awesome. How big is your team in Vancouver here?
I was going to ask Shayla, but Shayla hasn't yet had a chance to be in the office. I'd say I think we're around 80 to 100 people here in Vancouver, and now globally we're sitting at 700, which has been some pretty crazy growth. When I joined only a year and a half ago, we were about 380. So doubled in size since then, with some kind of fluctuation throughout, and yeah, it's been a ride. It's been an adventure with a company that's going through its hypergrowth phase, like Dialpad is right now.
Yeah, sounds like I can relate to Shayla a little bit. I just signed on with a new company during the pandemic as well, and definitely trying to onboard into the culture of a new company can be tricky over the last year, but it's been an exciting journey. So. That's great. I noticed you had a slide there that touched on Dialpad strategies, but I was just curious, like, if you have any kind of statement around, like, what's the vision of Dialpad? Like, where did it start? Where is it going? What's sort of the long-term approach?
Yeah. So, as you might well have guessed, Dialpad started with voice communications, and it was meant to be a very rapid way to scale up business communications in a company. So prior to VoIP, what massive enterprises would do is they would go into 6-month or sometimes year and a half long installations for phone systems. I didn't realize the impact of that, not having worked in telephony before, until I came to Dialpad, when we had a customer call us on a Friday night and say, by Monday morning, I need I think it was 10,000 seats. I need 10,000 business phones in my company. And Dialpad was able to make that happen because we're able to scale with the cloud. And so Monday morning, everyone was working from home, and that company was able to communicate across the business. And the type of impact and growth that can have is quite profound. So in terms of strategy now, Dialpad ultimately wants to be the unified communications platform for a business. And so imagine being in the contact center case, you're a contact center agent who's dealing with a customer over chat, and you immediately drop into the phone call. You answer a couple questions. You might then share a screen to solve a problem with that customer, and then drop out of that and continue things on with the chat. All of that being logged with your respective CRM and ticketing systems. Maybe you use Zendesk or something like that, and all of that done throughout Dialpad. Not only can you hopefully do that, but Dialpad ultimately wants people to do that from anywhere. So you could do that on your phone just the same as you do that on your computer. And we're really pushing this kind of mobile first mandate more recently than we ever have before.
Awesome. Thanks for that. I was going to tap into another question I had, which is around like the problem to solve. So that use case was really good to hear about. Somebody needs 10,000 phones tomorrow. What are you going to do about it? Good to hear that real world example. Maybe we can slide into like your product team at Dialpad. So you got that how we're structured slide ready to go. But what is the structure that you have, and what sort of skills and the product team that you have do you look for?
Yeah, Shayla, why don't you take this away?
Yeah, for sure. So as you probably collected from the previous slides, we have 4 main products, one being the video conferencing, next being our core VoIP, Dialpad Talk, and then Dialpad Contact Center and Dialpad Cell. So Dialpad Contact Center, is exactly that, being able to scale a call center solution very quickly, and then Cell has some specific analytics focused on the Cell use case. And then within those 4 core products, there's various components that touch either all of those products or some of them. So analytics being the product team that I sit on, and then voice intelligence. As Brian mentioned, he's the PM for that team. Then there's platform, integrations, growth, mobile, telephony, billing, things that touch all of the 4 core products.
Awesome.
Yeah, so how that manifests from a product team standpoint, we have 2 product directors. at Dialpad, and each one of these kind of pinkish salmon-colored icons are a product manager. So we've got 1 PM per vertical, those being the light colors up at the top, and then 1 PM per horizontal, those being the blue lines along the bottom. And that kind of networked structure sort of helps us grow fast and still maintain kind of hopefully a clear vision on each one of those verticals.
Awesome. Just to like pause that thought as well. So if somebody's looking to join Dialpad as a product manager or any of the product roles, what do you look for in terms of like successful candidates? Like, is there a skill set, any kind of like learning experience from your own journeys in product as to like what qualities are really empowering success at Dialpad in product?
Shayla, do you want to give that a start?
Yeah, I would say the ability to execute is really important. Erring on the side of action, as well as like you saw from our corporate structure, we're very kind of codependent teams. So the ability to identify dependencies and act on those proactively, I think, is really important across teams. And then by virtue of being a hypergrowth company, the ability to be very self-directed in your product management skills, I think, is important. You really need to, own what needs to happen next to push the needle on your product team.
Cool. One that I've seen in a lot of my product roles as well is just around collaboration. When you have that many independent product managers all working together, it can be quite a noise to try and get everybody to collaborate. So just between the product teams, what does collaboration look like at Dialpad?
Yeah, I'm just going to click through some slides here just to see what I have to talk to. Yeah, okay, good. So really quickly thrown together, but more or less just to help with my thoughts on answering it. Each of those vertical and horizontal teams will ultimately choose their own day-to-day rituals. I've listed, of course, Scrum and Kanban as 2 frameworks that might be applied within those groups, and mostly that's it. There are a few that are following rigid Scrum as is described in the manifesto, but many will apply its components. How we kind of collaborate across teams and within teams, just a couple things in terms of the rituals that we go through. Daily, each team will have through written forms, email, Slack, we'll use Dialpad. They'll do their stand-ups typically on alternating days. On the weekly basis, in each team, I'll have design reviews in where there's a representative, at least from each of our functions, engineers, designers, PMs, QA, etc. And do learning sessions. I think that's something that I've quickly learned that Dialpad does really well, in contrast to some other companies I've been at, is we'll take the time to pause and say, hey, this is what I learned. And it's not always good, right? It's sometimes the hard things. Across teams, that exists both internal and across teams, those learning sessions, though I haven't listed it. But we ultimately do a session per month with, this is per week, with engineering managers, with PMs, with QA, and everyone gets in a room, almost too big of a meeting at this point with how quickly we've grown. And more or less it's, hey, what was done last week and what are the major blockers or things that are coming this week? A company that has so many horizontals, as you saw in those blue lines, turns out that meeting can be very valuable. Each thing that a team does has an impact on another team. And in terms of how we organize ourselves and communicate, there are a million different threads, and that's the one thing that's solid that gets everyone together. And so even though those water cooler conversations aren't happening anymore, they're still remotely happening over a Dialpad or Slack conversation. And getting together in that weekly meeting is probably the one thing that keeps us together on a weekly basis. And then on a monthly basis, we have across team, check-ins with marketing and sales and that kind of thing, with both of them to describe strategy and also hear what our customers are saying. So that's a really powerful one from the sales perspective as well.
Awesome. So within the element of collaboration, I saw you had a little slide of it prior to this one as well, but like in terms of the skills that are required for product managers to, be truly independent and take care of like the various verticals and horizontals that you have, like what kind of skills beyond Shayla, what you had shared there in terms of like being output delivery and that sort of work, do you think are needed from the teams in all of this work?
Well, of course, the ability to empathize with users and clearly articulate to the team, who we're building for and why we're building what we're building. The ability to set a clear vision for the product and tie that vision back to the overall portfolio objective, and prioritize the various different features that you could build against each other to achieve that objective in the most effective manner. And touching on what Brian mentioned, taking time to reflect and see how those initiatives eventually turned out and see what you can do to improve them moving forward. Of course, being a strong moderator across various different teams and different functions.
Yeah.
Do you have anything to add to that, Brian, off the top of your head?
Yeah, I was thinking actually as you were talking, so Dialpad has a product that can be applied to almost any application, which is interesting and very difficult from a product perspective. So now when you think about like trying to come up with user personas, for example, they could almost be infinite. You have your person that maybe is mostly using the product for interviews, maybe they're a recruiter. You have those that are doing sermons on our products. It's almost impossible to figure out all the different applications of how people use a phone. So one of the things that we do with these kind of product verticals is each try to become at least experts in how that product is going to be used. So contact center, it's a phone system with a whole bunch of features around it that help you ultimately route calls. And that product manager has really become an expert in terms of how contact centers function and how they evaluate themselves. And one of the things that product manager does is try to educate the rest of the product managers who are contributing to his product, but in different ways, about the different types of users that exist within there. And so I think in contrast to how I've seen product maybe at some other companies, both that I've had conversations with and been at, we almost need to be teachers. And so educators really. And I think that has always existed from a product manager standpoint to your team of engineers, QA and designers. But in this case, it has to exist across product management as well, because we can't be experts on every single type of user.
That's really cool to hear. I mean, the idea of a product manager being a subject matter expert to their domain and domain knowledge in general is something that's, often sought and hard to really accomplish. So what sort of like learning and development or scale does it take when you start as a PM at Dialpad to kind of become that domain expert, as you described it?
Oh, wow. Well, yeah, I would say, answering from my own experience, I mentioned I joined a year and a half ago. I didn't come from telephony. In fact, I came from search. And prior to that, I was in gesture recognition in data science. Actually, I was a data scientist prior. So none of my background got me prepared for the industry that I was about to join. And I still don't feel like I'm an expert. But one of the things I think that helped me was more or less around focusing around certain groups. And so when I first joined, with some conversations with colleagues, I learned that one of the major applications of voice intelligence could be in the sales context. And so I set out and I did, about 100 user interviews, each with, managers, sales representatives at different levels, sales engineers, etc. And ultimately defined personas, but really for myself, because I needed it. And then now, I'm on to contact center and really doing the same, leveraging that product manager and user interviews to try to become an expert again in a different area. And I think that there's no better resource than talking to users. So as much as I've done reading online of what is a salesperson and how do they operate, I learned way more in a half an hour conversation with a user than I ever did reading 5 hours of blog material and books.
Yeah, that's great. That actually leads me to my next set of questions too. But I've found that as well. Like I've pivoted between a number of different industries, all in product roles over the last number of years. And every time I start into something brand new, that like race to become a domain expert always presented itself. So something you said there just kind of triggered me into that of like, okay, like that's always the goal, but what's the journey there? And I relate to that quite a bit as well. I always find I start with user interviews and talk to like teams and stakeholders and the like, but it's always that end user when you really get into the problem solving area and journey mapping and trying to like paint out the picture of exactly how do you use these things and what does it work and what works well, what doesn't work well. You really start to learn a lot more where you need to focus your effort through that. So maybe you can also walk me through like how you do customer discovery, product discovery with your customers. What does that look like at Dialpad?
Yeah. Shannon, do you want me to, or sorry, Shayla, do you want me to take that?
Sure. Yeah.
So discovery. Discovery takes many forms at Dialpad, and particularly, that largely depends on some of the team that we're in. But I'll first talk about kind of some tools for how we figure out the types of problems that we want to work on. There are ultimately 3 categories that any product manager at Dialpad is going to be looking at. We have our analytics. Just to show you the tools, we use Amplitude and Domo for all of our visualizations of analytics. Amplitude, if you're not familiar, is an event logging system where you can visualize events, so click events and those kinds of things, actions that your users take. And Domo is a representation of our database. We do a lot of customer interviews. I target ideally weekly. I feel good about my job when I'm interviewing 1 customer per week, and I feel less good about my job when I'm interviewing less than that. That's just what I've observed. That might vary depending on the individual or the application. And then last but not least, we have our internal sales and customer service representatives. In there, we collect feedback through a product called Uservoice. And so Uservoice is essentially just a way for a salesperson to assign an opportunity to a feature. So this opportunity is $70,000, dollars per month, and this is the feature that would convert that opportunity for us to get, so a new customer. So we listen in through these different signals to get an idea. And so let's say we have an idea now. How do we go about the discovery process for that idea? It's almost a feedback loop, right? So what we do is typically mock something up, either at very low fidelity and something like Balsamic, or if it's a little bit more serious and complex, together with a designer, to get some medium fidelity mocks. And we'll do user interviews again. So we'll target, one of the things that I like to do is I like to target users that I think are in the target demographic and complement those with users that I think are out of the target demographic. And we consolidate those notes and wrap them up into a 1-pager. The best of us hold then a session where any product manager can join, and that gets recorded. I'm at fault. I don't always get time to do that, and that's something that I want to do more of. And then we build a test. That test usually needs to manifest in a feature flag on our product, in where we put it out to a couple different customers and have them test it for a little while before it gets released to our general audience. Have iteration within that whole process, and it all starts with really a hypothesis through data, or either left or right here, the data or internal sales team, our customer support, and then converging on user interviews, more or less.
Those are great channels. I always see at any company that I've worked with or other product managers that I talk about is all of these being channels or inputs to measure. These are really, really strong ones. And I find a lot of companies are usually strong in one of the 3, but not necessarily all 3 of the 3. But it's a really good way to frame it. once you capture that idea, and I also really liked what you had to say about like making sure people outside of an expected demographic are tested with this as well, because too often we validate sort of like a self-fulfilling prophecy of like, well, this user really wants this, so if I share it with them, are they going to like it? Well, of course they're going to like it. That's what they've asked for. But what about the person that never asked for it? Are they still going to respond as such? So really good to A/B test between both audiences. But let's talk about prioritization. So like once you have a number of discovered ideas, opportunities, features you want to do, enhancements, how do you handle prioritization, and how do you choose like what to build now versus maybe build later, or maybe not build at all if it doesn't make sense?
Yeah. Shayla, do you want to take that?
Sure. So yeah, of course, every team will have different objectives that they're working towards, but I can speak to analytics and kind of what we're focusing on and how we prioritize various different features. So we are a vertical team, and so we're looking and trying to understand personas for all the other, we're a horizontal team, so we're focusing on the different verticals and how we can help ship features that will support the majority of those if possible. So that kind of takes place as two main focuses: surfacing information that or data that users couldn't access previously, or making that information more actionable or usable. And anytime that we can kind of couple either one of those or two of those and address, say, the sell persona and the contact center persona, that would be like a way of prioritizing. Of course, we also pull in effort, what's currently possible. If there's any dependencies, like I mentioned, we are very dependent across teams, so we need to judge what we can ship in a timely manner versus what needs to be kind of planned for more. But yeah, we do essentially a one-pager, outlining like a fake press release and share that with the PM team, get some feedback there, and I'm trying to think of how else. There's lots of, like, many different teams do it different ways, but that's how the analytics team has been doing it so far.
Awesome. I love your framework here. It looks really good. I'm a big fan of the IDEO, design thinking, feasibility, viability, desirability matrix, and I can see there's lots of stages taking that into account. I'm also a big fan of the one pager. I really love when you can run that in front of people and get some early validation on that. So that's good to hear. Talk me through any kind of challenges that you spot, like maybe in the day-to-day or maybe specific product teams, but like what sort of like big challenges are you working through internally in terms of, anything that impacts product? And maybe use an example of like a problem that you can think of that was recently addressed.
Shayla, do you want to talk more generally about some challenges, and then I'll go into a specific example?
Yeah, sure. I would say more generally, given the hypergrowth phase that we're in, ensuring that strong communication between teams is definitely a challenge and something that we're cognizant of and trying to find, like Brian said, we're outgrowing meetings, but we still need those touch points, and how to kind of have that collaboration as consistent and strong as it's been in the past, while we add more product managers and more engineers and various levels of product managers as well. Like I'm the first APM on the team, so we have a larger hierarchy now. And figuring out that the best way to communicate while growing quickly.
Cool. Yeah, I could relate to that as well. I just recently joined Rise as a group product manager, and it's the first introduction of hierarchy in the product team. So
right.
Shift the dynamic a little bit and change accountabilities, but it also is interesting to see like what are the different seniority levels within product, and what exactly makes that up, and how do we mentor each other in that regard. So it's an exciting place to be. So I just want to shift a little bit to ask more about 2021 and beyond. Like what, for both of you working in product, like what's really exciting about working at Dialpad and some of the projects that you're on? What are you really looking forward to in the year ahead?
Yeah, go ahead, Shayla.
Yeah, I guess in one like simple statement, you could say, like, given the time that we're in and the challenges that everyone's facing from working remotely, it's very cool to be actively, engaging in that industry and finding ways to make people more effective in working remotely. And yeah, the example that Brian brought up early in the beginning, that we were able to take a contact center and move them completely remotely, all of their agents overnight. That's very exciting and cool to experience. But yeah, overall, accomplishing this vision of unified communications, that you can have conferencing, chat, video, everything on mobile and on your computer, and augmenting that with artificial intelligence to help people either get tasks done or be prompted to do tasks that they maybe wouldn't have had time to do otherwise, and get the most out of their digital communications. I don't know if you want to add anything to that, Brian.
No, I mean, I agree with it. And I think, I think on a personal level, what I was excited about when I joined Dialpad is the same reason why I'm still here and excited about this year. And it hints on a little bit of what Shayla said, where in the past, I worked on a product where I knew it should exist. People should have a text box to search in. How you do that is challenging. Don't get me wrong, we had all sorts of challenges, and how to make it better is also quite challenging. But what I'm excited about at Dialpad is that we're trying to work on some problems that I don't know if they exist as problems yet. I don't know if users will love having a live transcript on their call, if that's beneficial to them. And this discovery process is unique. I haven't experienced it before. So what it gives me the opportunity to do is really be creative and imaginative in the types of solutions that users describe as problems. I think, like Steve Jobs said, no one ever said they wanted a phone in their pocket or something like that. And that's true in this case too. No one has ever told me that they want, a certain feature of live recommendations on their calls or something like that. But listening to the problems that they have, if an agent says, it takes me forever to retrieve the information that I need to when I'm on a call, that's interesting to me. And trying to latch on to that problem to find solutions to it is really unique. And so I think I'm interested in figuring out more problems basically to solve that I don't yet know about. And especially as we move to a work from home environment, I wasn't aware of these problems a year ago, and now I'm just learning about them now. And so it's really exciting from that perspective.
Yeah.
I think, from a product development perspective.
Yeah, this year, I think anybody in the problem obsession space, you're starting to figure out, like, beyond your own experience changing through remote working and being isolated at home and fear and panic out there in the air. There's lots of new opportunities that are opening up as well. So just to stay close to that problem area and kind of positive questions of, like, would this help? Or you find new things as opposed to things that are just building on either ideas that happened before. I wanted to take a pause. I know we've got about 13 people in the room here. Just to open it up to any Q&A if anybody wants to type in chat or go off mute and share a thought. But just want to open it up to some Q&A for Shayla and Brian here. Any thoughts? People are probably furiously typing away, and it takes time to see it. Is there anything, Shayla and Brian as well, like, I asked a few questions here and skipped a few, but was there anything else that you wanted to cover today as well for this first session? Oh, we got one question. Would you be sharing the slides? It was hard to see some of the text as Hopin doesn't let you see it at full screen. Just curious if this is, it says confidential, but is there any abstracts of this that you could share out to any participants?
Yeah, and I think also this session is being recorded, but maybe not the slides, or is that wrong?
I'm not too sure. We can find out for you, though. I'll let you know, Leo.
Okay. Yeah.
Send that over to the moderators, and we can hopefully get in touch.
Yeah. Leo will follow up. Any questions that we had or wanted to answer? I don't know. I can't think of anything. Shayla, do you have anything?
Not off the top of my head. No.
I know we were going to have a break in the middle of the session as well, because we're going to have 2 different sessions. So we'll probably be repeating a lot of this after.
Sure.
But here we go. Another question coming in from Jamie. How does the PM team tackle AI and NLP competency of the product? Dedicated PMs are a part of every product manager's role.
Jamie, I'll maybe try to rephrase that, and please type yes or no if I've got it right or wrong. So the first part of the question there is, how does PM tackle AI or NLP competency? Does that mean the competency of the product manager towards their knowledge of AI and NLP? Could you confirm that? Yeah, perfect. Well, I guess that's why I joined Dialpad, and that was fortunate for me. So as kind of some context background of my background, at least, I used to work as a data scientist. I worked for a startup in Kitchener-Waterloo that now has since been acquired. But that was my first kind of professional career in data science, which brought me into doing search at a hotel search company called Trivago, in where we were dealing with big systems, lots of data, and moving really fast. When I got talking with Dialpad, I had been introduced to NLP both at Trivago and prior. So was able to have some conversations with the data scientists, and I think that that's helped me. I also think it's been a hindrance to me. And I think that this is like a good space to be really honest. I feel like I'm quite good at having a conversation with a data scientist or engineer about the solution. And sometimes I get so caught up in how cool that solution is that sometimes, even myself as a product manager, I forget about the problem or the business. And I think that that's something that someone more from a marketing background or a history or economics background coming into product management does a much better job at naturally. So that's something that I really have to try to better myself in. And yes, to answer your question, we have a dedicated product manager for data science and data engineering for voice intelligence, and that's me. So that's how Dialpad's chosen to kind of go down the product development path of AI.
Okay, we have another question from Diana on how do you measure product performance and on what cadence?
So we apply a derivative of objectives and key results, or OKRs, in where any project that we take on in a quarter aligns to an objective and is measured through ideally measurable key results. In my own context, for example, I'm interested in not only some adoption, but as well, the stickiness of the features that we develop. And that being the number of days per week, maybe, that someone spends using one of the features that the voice intelligence team develops. And we track those almost on a weekly basis to see if we're having an impact on them. Some of these are more lag measures, and some of them are more lead measures. And what I mean by lag is sometimes we have to launch a feature to figure out if it was useful or not. And that's almost a necessary evil, I find, in some of the work that we do. I would love to have more lead measures to say, if we do this, then we can observe that and know that we're heading on the right trajectory to then measure it all at the end. But other times, to measure adoption or something like that, we launch a feature and on a small group and see if it had an impact.
Okay, thanks. Just an update as well. It looks like there's a flaw in the Hopin platform. We didn't get the queue to break to go back to the main stage. So it was minutes ago that it was the middle. So we likely had a few people drop off and a few new people join. So just maybe by show of hands, if anyone was still in the room from the first session, just let us know if you have any additional questions. Otherwise, we might want to just reset and go back to hearing a little bit more about Dialpad for the new attendees. Just trying to double check who joined the room, get a sense on where we're standing. Yeah, it looks like mostly a new group here. So sorry to pause and reset after that Q&A and go back. I was hoping there'd be some sort of queue or a moderator would have went into the room to join, but it didn't happen. So maybe we can just go back and follow your PowerPoint at the beginning again, just deliver sort of the presentation you had. We'll stop at the part where you get maybe to the product team and open that up to the Q&A as well. So maybe just start about what Dialpad is and what you're about.
There we go, I was muted. Yeah, absolutely. Start from scratch. I will say though, I really liked getting those questions as we were talking, and so as we're going through some slides, just interrupt us, and I find it much more engaging to just have a dialogue back and forth, even though one of us is speaking, the other one's chatting. So my name is Brian, and maybe I already covered some of this for some that joined. I'm a product manager at Dialpad, and I work on a product called Voice Intelligence, of which we'll go into in a second. And I think probably a lot of that was already alluded to in my answer to AI and NLP at Dialpad. But for those that didn't join and you want to learn more about me, then just ping it in the chat, and I'll come back to it later.
Yeah, keep the questions coming if you have any.
My name's Shayla. I'm the Associate Product Manager at Dialpad on the analytics team. I joined about 6 months ago. I'm based in Vancouver. And previous to that, I worked on an analytics product for a startup in Munich, Germany. And previous to that, an analytics product at IBM.
Cool. So a little bit about what Dialpad does. Dialpad is a telephony provider for voice over internet protocol, and we're entirely based in the cloud. We have 4 different product verticals, of which you'll see soon how we structure the company as well. But a quick kind of round of information for each one of these product verticals. So we have a video and audio conferencing solution. Actually, we have 2 of them now. In the first session, I didn't remember to mention that. But we recently acquired a company called Hi5, and Hi5 does a lot of room communications. So when you're in the office and joining a conference call and that kind of thing. The product that you see here is Uber Conference, and that behaves like many others, with kind of some additions that we're proud of, where you can have a video call with multiple people. We also have our unified communications product. It's called Dialpad Talk. And it's basically the replacement for a desk phone for anyone that's in an office. So you might have an office or a front desk, and instead of having that front desk, though you could still use it with Dialpad, you might have a cell phone or something like that. Then we have 2 products. One of them is Contact Center, and that aims to solve the typical call center or contact center case in where you're handling requests, both inbound calls and outbound calls. And then you have the sales dialer, which is mostly an outbound case where you have a sales agent who's making a lot of calls in their day, ultimately trying to sell their product and connect with others. Across all of these, we have a layer that we call Voice Intelligence, which gives real-time analytics through natural language processing and automatic speech recognition. And as I mentioned before, we do all of this in the cloud, which is powerful for us because we can scale really quickly. So if a new customer comes on board, we can get them up and running in a very short period of time. Yeah. Is there? Oh, that's a chat move. Okay. So in terms of Dialpad's strategy, we ultimately want to be the unified communications platform, and so. Conversations are diverse. You're having a chat with your colleague and then jumping on the phone and then finishing it up in a conference call 2 days later. All of that, in one place ultimately is what Dialpad wants to do. And what we want to do with that is be able to provide analytics and artificial intelligence across the entire communication suite. So if you had an action item out of a SMS message, then you would be able to see that action item and take action on it in your next meeting or prepare for your next meeting, for example. And then lastly, we want to integrate with anything that's industry leading. And so if someone is taking their calls out of, their Salesforce or Zendesk or something like that, how they're managing their customers, then they can do that through Dialpad and still get all of this functionality. Quick look at our conferencing solution. Quick link, join the call, no pins, very easy to use. Our Dialpad Talk product, as I mentioned, it can be directly on your phone. It can also be integrated with, a internet connected desk phone. You can send SMS, you can have group chats, lots of different fun stuff there. And of course, the analytics piece is something that a lot of administrators and coaches are interested in. So you're a call center and you want to know, certain metrics, hold lengths, all those kinds of things. And then across all that, voice intelligence, which is my area of expertise. We identify, speakers on the call. We do kind of our own custom in-house built transcription service. So per customer that uses a certain vocabulary, they get, those words boosted for their calls. Uber conference, for example, is not a word that we use in the English language, though it's a product name, and you want to see that that's correctly transcribed in your conversations. And then kind of the last picture of that is the natural language processing picture, which is really exciting because we can do things like real-time sentiment analysis, where managers can take actions on calls that are going increasingly negative immediately on the call. You can detect things like action items and key questions and where there's follow-up needed and those kinds of things. And this is a quick view of just what a call center manager might see. Call center agent might see. So while they're on a call, they'll have Zendesk integrated, so it tells them who they're speaking with. They're asked a question about some competition, and a card will pop up on how that agent should answer that, controlled by their manager. That's a great question, user research. I'll get to that in a second. And then their manager can also take control of the conversation if they need to. They can jump right on and join that call easily. Blake, if you don't mind, I'll pivot to the user research question.
Sure. Yeah, let's go to it. So we usually have a question about customer needs and user research, which we'll get to again later, but let's answer the question first. So what kind of user research do you do at Dialpad?
Yeah, so actually, I'm really excited. I'll answer your question in a second. I'm really excited, though, because we recently just hired our first UX researcher entirely dedicated to this. And that's really empowering for me, at least as a product manager, because not only does that person help answer some hard questions, but they establish best practices. And I think, like many companies, we're constantly evolving to further our practices. I can tell you what we do currently. Right now, I'll identify customers to reach out through either by theme. Maybe it's a certain customer who's interested in redacting personally identifiable information or something like that because they work in the financial industry or they work in the healthcare industry. And I'll reach out to customers that way. I'll also look at how they're interacting with the product. So if I see a customer that's a power user on a certain feature, I want to learn how else they're using that feature. And so I'll reach out to them or vice versa. Maybe they're not a power user. And that interaction happens over a video call in where we'll interview about 5 to 10 customers per topic, summarize those notes and collect them up in a sort of a one-pager, and then have a discussion on that if we're leading it right, and all the product managers and designers will be involved in that discussion about what we learned from that conversation. So that's one approach. We also do things, very quantitatively by looking at kind of user interactions and stuff. But I think that probably the former is what you're asking about. So feel free to ask me to expand, or Shayla, if you want anything to add.
I think that was a good summary.
I love your comment about a UX strategist. That's huge. Usually that falls on the product manager's lap or the design team's lap, and trying to come up with that. So having somebody sift through all the connections and trying to build themes and patterns that are evolving, that's an awesome step. Diana, if that didn't answer your question or you have any follow-ups, feel free to chat. Okay, awesome. We'll touch a little bit more about that in a bit as well, but let's roll back into the product team and structure over at Dialpad as well. So if you could share with us sort of how the product team is structured and talk through that a little bit.
Yeah, so there's a dedicated PM for each vertical. As Brian mentioned in the overarching strategy of Dialpad, we have 4 core products: our video conferencing, Dialpad Talk, Contact Center, and Dialpad Sell. So each of the little salmon colored icons represents a PM. And then we also have horizontal teams that represent components that impact either all of these core products or some of them. So we have like the analytics team, that's the team that I sit on, voice intelligence team, that's Brian's team, integrations, billing, platform, growth, mobile, and then our telephony as well.
Nice.
Yeah. And then actually, we didn't talk about it, but I think it's relevant. How do you share insights across PMs? Great, I'll get to that in a second too. Each one of these teams, by the way, is more or less cross-functional, depending on the group. For sure, in the vertical columns there, you have a designer per group, a QA per group, at least one, a group of engineers that are typically full stack, and right now, unfortunately, we're low on data analysts. So if you know data analysts, send them our way. So a couple data analysts kind of shared across groups. And then on the horizontal side of things, it's more or less the same. Shayla in analytics has that exact same structure. In voice intelligence, we have kind of more functional groups, but across NLP and ASR, and then the front ends that build them. But more or less, it's that kind of cross-functional matrix structure for each one of those groups. How do we share insights across PMs? I don't know, Shayla, I've been doing a bunch of talking. Do you want to take this one?
Yeah, I would say, anytime that one of the PMs does like a customer interview, we typically email out the summary with some like highlights and then the recording of that customer interview if we were able to record the session. We also, like my team, for example, did a larger research project. Myself, along with the designer on my team, did, set out clear objectives and created a larger report, and then sent that out to all the team leads and PMs. I imagine that this process will evolve to become more effective as well. As Brian mentioned, we're bringing on our first UX researcher, so I hope that we'll get more effective in that. But yeah, we are quite codependent, the teams. So for example, like my team predominantly focuses on the contact center persona, but if we're gonna build a feature that focuses on Sell, then I would lean heavily on the Sell PM to get those insights and ensure that the team is empathizing with that user for that particular feature.
Mm-hmm. And I think Shayla was a little bit modest. She set an example with the designer for a way to share insights after customer interviews, and it was very well done. So the one pager, or had a summary at the beginning, and then kind of the key findings down lower if you were to read on further. And then they held a open session that was recorded. I think Shayla, correct me if I'm wrong, in where any product manager or designer could join and learn from that. And so I think that was exemplary in terms of how user research could be done. And then on the side of things where we are doing more exploration, then there's always an interview note sent out over email. So it's a quick 3 bullet, here, this is what I got. These are the action items. Here's a link to the recording.
And likewise, I enjoy, especially because I think Brian's team and my team work quite closely together. Anytime there's a customer interview email in my inbox from Brian, it's a good day. Good reading.
Awesome. So maybe you could jump into building on that with collaboration. So, we've talked about working with users, but maybe expand on sort of collaboration and some of the ceremonies you do throughout the week.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so very unattractive slide, I apologize, but really just meant to be talking points. In each one of those teams, by the way, I call it out at the beginning, it's up to the team, but mostly they'll adopt some ceremonies from Scrum or Kanban. Many teams are using a form of Kanban, and the ceremonies from Scrum. On the daily basis, each team has written forms of communication. They do stand-ups. On the weekly basis, each team has design reviews. And so I think different to what I've experienced before, Dialpad on these design reviews will decide to do some discovery on a problem. And then the designer will go off and create a prototype, typically in a week or two, depending on how complex that is, and then present that back to the team. And the team will kind of collaborate on whether that makes sense to present in front of a customer or not. And so that's the purpose of this design review, is like, let's quickly identify the holes in our initial hypotheses that the designer went out and designed. And they might have evolved their designs over that week period, but then come back together as a team and figure out if that's the right thing or not. Then there's an end of week email. There's learning sessions, which I think are really great in the culture of Dialpad. Across teams, all teams. So every product manager, every manager, technical manager, and every QA participates on a weekly basis on a Monday morning, a what's done and what's coming meeting. And that's meant to inform not only each of us who are ultimately collaborating on versions of the same product, but also, telephony and other business units, marketing, to be able to observe kind of, what's coming in order to communicate out to their teams on the actions that they might need to take to support that. And then on a monthly basis, we sync with marketing and sales into independent meetings to hear insights of customers, describe, more roadmap type things, and figure out communication strategies with our users.
Thanks. Is there any questions from the audience just in regards to collaboration or anything shared here? Feel free to leave it in the chat if so. We can answer to that. We skipped past it in our first session, but I'm hoping we could kind of touch on it. But just about that focus on a past failure, that was a good learning opportunity for everyone at Dialpad. Is there anything you could share in terms of like a big lesson that was learned from the past and what you did about it?
Yeah. So I have this funny story when I first joined Dialpad, and I'm gonna go to some slides. So I learned a lot from profanity when I came to Dialpad, and this manifested itself in product decisions down the line, which I'm happy about now, but was frustrated with at the time. And so the backstory is that turns out that everyone has different sensitivities to swear words. And if you're transcribing someone's call, those sensitivities are going to manifest. So some people, if you make a mistranscription and turns out that they say a word that sounded like, a swear word, and you wrote a swear word, are going to get angry by it. Others aren't. In this case, there are a few strong voices in where it was a problem for them. And so the quick action was, okay, let's replace it. Actually, at first we replaced it with which was a bad idea, and I'll get to that in a second. And and then later replaced it with expletive, which is more in line with what you'd see on closed captioning or something like that. So what did I learn? Well, there's a couple of different things. The right-handed slide, because your eyes were probably drawn to it right away, is what I'll talk to first. Build, measure, learn. It's not only applied to product development, it applies to your personal development, and it applies to the way that you communicate. And in this context, what the story is on a Friday, I think at night, we got a number of complaints from a few very important customers that this was a problem. Someone very senior got involved and said this needs to be fixed. Without being able to pull in everyone who is necessary to fix that problem or to discuss solutions for that problem, we needed to take action on it over the weekend and get a solution on Monday. And we did. And what we didn't really fully talk about is the impacts on the different teams. So what I mentioned was we replaced it with at the beginning. And natural language processing needs to understand what is happening with language. And is a very informative word in certain ways that you use it. And that has an impact on the types of insights that you can determine from the calls. ASR also needs to understand how people are engaging with their transcript, and replacing with had an impact on that, and so on. And so here's what I learned. I think each time you're presented with a problem as something that you need to take care of, the first thing that you should do is define on the left some criteria for how to respond, even if it's just for yourself, but likely you're dealing with a team. And so what we did was we defined different tiers of problems with red, yellow, and green responses, where red is the most severe. And we called out what the scope is, so how to identify whether it's in that category or not, what the communication strategy is across the team, and what the solution timelines should be. We also gave some examples when we had them. What we did was we built a solution at that time. We learned from it, or we measured its results because we knew that it had an impact on NLP. We learned from it and we iterated on it. And then, ultimately now we're actually, back to launching swear words. This was, I think, interesting because I think there are cases where you need to react quickly and you need to assess how reversible the decision is. In this case, I felt comfortable making the decision quickly on the Friday that we replace it with because it was a very reversible decision. Replacing it then with something else is easy. And so act fast on something that you feel is important, but then measure its impact and learn from it and then iterate on it. And what we've done now is iterated 2 or 3 times on that and actually made it much better. Customers like the experience now, more or less. And I think that's something that I'm not only applying to how I develop products, but how I go about making decisions as well. So I think that's probably my biggest lesson in the recent history.
That's a great one. Makes me think of the famous 80-20 rule a lot too, which is you can think about something over and over and over again, but you're never going to make it perfect in that last 20% of something. So moving fast and realizing at least you've got a framework for a solution, you can always implement something further later on. So great stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
So maybe I'll again pause it to the group. If anybody has any specific questions, feel free to open up on it. But maybe talk a little bit more. We had touched on this in the first session as well, but just in terms of, as you scale, and you mentioned you're in a hyper growth stage, like what sort of challenges and difficulties are you facing in that approach to scale?
Yeah, I guess the main challenge is maintaining the level of communication and the quality of communication as the team grows both larger and with a different hierarchy. So we're hiring more PMs, more engineers, as well as different levels of PMs. For example, I'm the first APM. We've acquired High Five, so we have another director of product management, and ensuring that we have effective communication across teams and are proactively identifying different dependencies and getting ahead of that is I'd say our biggest challenge.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think another thing is we're learning. I can't remember if we talked about this in the first session or this session, but we're learning how to be experts of a domain and still kind of maintain a general level of knowledge of what's happening else in the company. So, a company grows where the first product manager is one of the founders, if not multiple of them. They eventually decide they need a product manager because they've got too much on their plate. That product manager gets hired and is very execution focused. And the founders typically lead, a lot of the vision. And then you hire more product managers and still very execution focused until eventually it bleeds out into those product managers are the one leading the roadmap. And I think as you grow that out, it's because those product managers need to take time to learn all of the necessary components of who your users are, what the complexities are with the product, what the complexities are with the technology, in order to be able to inform those decisions. And I think as we grow, we're learning that as well. So we're hiring more PMs that are becoming more specialized and can lead more of the product roadmap and vision. And that's great. But now trying to communicate that across all different functions is a challenge as you grow. So I think that that hyper growth phase is a make or break part of any company. And if you can solve it through communication, then I think you're better off to succeed than if you can't.
Yeah, it's definitely a challenge. And that's a good one to wrap up on. Ross just mentioned that we're asking everybody to go over to the Q&A session. I think it's in the session section. So Brian, Shayla, thank you very much for your time tonight. Sorry for the confusion between the two sessions there, but I appreciate you rolling with the punches. And for anybody in the group, if you have any questions lingering, please leave it in the overall event, and we'll see if we can get that answer for you. But thank you all for your time.
Fantastic. Thanks, Blake, and thanks everyone for joining.
All right. Have a great night.
Thank you.
Bye.